morning.
Good morning.
I'm glad that you're all here today, and we are glad that we do have some sunshine. We know that we've got more rain in the forecast, and so we need to be very prayerful about that because that's going to affect a lot of people with the ground that's already saturated. Just let you know that Cheyenne and Jack and Katie went home. Jack wasn't feeling too well. I think he got a little too cold yesterday at the game and probably didn't rest like he needed to. So he was out of resources. So he needed to, just wasn't feeling too good. Before we get into the lesson, also we're going to be starting more announcements and stuff, putting on the screen in between our Bible class and worship service. And so if there's things that are going on, like our ladies' Bible class and the BFS and youth functions and all that stuff, we ask that you email those things to Bryce with pictures, maybe a caption with it, so we have that on there. And any other kind of church news that we need to have on there as well, because I think it's good for us to see that up on the screen. It's really good for our visitors that come to see these things that are going on, so they can put a visual with faces that are up there that are going on. And I know we've done it in the past, and so if that makes any sense with what I'm asking. So if you're a leader of a class or a study or something, get that information to Bryce, and we'll get that put in there so we can have that kind of on a running loop between our classes and our worship service. Today we're going to be in John chapter 8. We're going to resume our study in John this week. And so in John chapter 8, starting in verse 1, is where we'll be this morning. Have you ever disliked someone so much that you would find ways to get them into trouble? Especially you siblings. Always trying to find something to get a big brother or little brother or big sister or little sister into trouble. So maybe kind of get the heat off of you or distract the parents to get off of your case, and because they've done something or said something to you that just really irritated you, so you're going to create a situation to get them in trouble. Has anybody ever done that? Or we don't want to raise hands on that one, do we? Have you ever hoped that someone would just get what they had coming to them? Have you ever hoped that? Have you ever thought that? If you really want to think about that for a second, what kind of judgment is that? Because what you're asking is that they get punished for something because they had it coming to them. And does that really reflect the love of Christ? No. How about this one? Have you ever been caught red-handed in some sin or some wrong, and then had that wrong or sin exposed in front of everyone? And if you had, how did that make you feel? To have that buried in front of everyone? Kind of interesting questions to start off the lesson with. But let's look at the text. And we're going to see that some of these things that I've just asked are in this text. John chapter 8, starting in verse 1. But Jesus went out to the Mount of Olives. Early in the morning he came again to the temple. All the people came to him, and he sat down and taught them. The scribes and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in adultery, and placing her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher, this woman has been caught in the act of adultery. Now, when the law of Moses commanded us to stone such a woman, so what do you say?" They said this to test him, that they might have some charge to bring against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as they continued to ask him, he stood up and said to them, "Let him who is without sin among you be the first to throw a stone at her. And once more he bent down and wrote on the ground. But when they heard it, they went away one by one, beginning with the older ones. And Jesus was left alone with the woman standing before him. Jesus stood up and said to her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" She said, "No one, Lord." And Jesus says, "Neither do I condemn you. And go from now on, sin no more." Wow. This is one of those stories that gets my hackles up and also sets my heart at ease at the same time. Here's something that's interesting about this. Who actually really is on trial here? Is the woman on trial, or is it Jesus on trial? And so we see this, and we see that this woman has been caught in the very act of adultery. And the Pharisees bring this woman to Jesus. This woman is just a pawn in their scheme. The Pharisees had no regard for this woman. They could care less about her. They wanted to catch Jesus in some kind of trap. And they're using this woman as bait. That makes me angry. That people would treat people that way. Even people who are doing wrong, to be treated in such a way as a pawn. As someone who is insignificant. And someone who's not really makes a matter of anything into a community. Because here's something that's interesting. They caught her in the act of adultery. They knew who she was. They knew what she was. They hadn't addressed the situation before. But they're taking it now to trap Jesus. What happened to taking care of it beforehand? There's some indications that they knew who this woman was. Because they caught her in the very act. Here's something also that's very interesting. They had no regard for God's law. So they want to bring this woman in to trap Jesus. But they themselves are not even following the law. Leviticus chapter 20 and verse 10 says, "If a man commits adultery with the wife of his neighbor, both the adulterer and the adulteress shall surely be put to death." That's what the law says. Deuteronomy chapter 22 verse 22 says, "If a man is found lying with the wife of another man, both of them shall die. The man who lay with the woman and the woman. So you shall purge the evil from Israel." Now, first and foremost, is what the woman did wrong? Yes. Was it against God's law? Yes. Is it still continuing? Is it still today against God's law? Yes. But here's the question. Where's the man? Oh, they brought the woman in. Where's the man? They're not even following God's law. Because they don't care about the woman. They really don't even care about the law in this situation. All they care about is trying to entrap Jesus. And they also say, the law of Moses commands us to stone this woman. Did you read that they must die by stoning in Leviticus or in Deuteronomy? It does say that they should be killed. It doesn't say how. They're not even following the law. They were trying to trap Jesus because they were thinking, if Jesus does not condemn this woman, he's breaking the law. And we've got it. Now we've got it. Or, if he decides to set this woman free, he loses popularity with the people who are following. So we can catch him either way. What a great scheme to think of. Now here's something that's interesting. How low do you have to be to think of something as such? How so far down the wrong path and hardened of heart must you be to think of that? The spiritual leaders of a community Does that not make you angry? Do you get angry sometimes reading the text because of things that are going on? And you think, how can people be so mean? And how can people be so cruel? And then I have to ask myself, have I ever been this mean? And have I ever been this cruel? And I have to confess that sometimes in my life, I have been just as mean. You know, I know I'm not the only one here. I'm not always a nice guy. I don't mean to be mean sometimes. I don't mean to hurt someone's feelings. It's never really been my intent. But sometimes it does happen. And I know I'm not the only one. And so they're doing all these things trying to trap Jesus. And what is Jesus' response? What does he do? They said this to test him. And then Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger on the ground. And as he's doing this, they keep asking him, they keep pressuring him, they keep pushing. What's your decision, Jesus? What are you going to do, Jesus? What do you say, Jesus? How are you going to get yourself out of this one, Jesus? Because we've got you. And Jesus is stooping down and he's writing on the ground. Now, we don't know what Jesus wrote. We can speculate, and it's okay to speculate as long as we keep it within some confines. Here's some things I speculate. I wonder if he's actually writing the law. I'm wondering if he's actually writing Leviticus 20, verse 10. Or Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 22. I wonder if he's writing down, guys, where's the man? Pharisees, just where is your heart in this matter? I wonder if maybe he's writing down their sins that they've committed. We don't know. But he's stooping down and he's writing it, and he's doing this in such a way that it's kind of building up some pressure. Jesus is very good at taking this crowd and bringing them to where he wants them to be. Because you see, who really is without sin? And if we are without sin, and we know, if we are with sin and we know that we come in contact with people who are sin, there's judgment that needs to happen. Now, not a judgmental attitude, but a judgment needs to happen. So what about this passing judgment? We know in Matthew chapter 7 and verses 1 through 2 that we judge by the word of God. It says, judge not that you be not judged. And that's where people want to stop. But we got to keep reading. For with the judgment you pronounce, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. So if you pass judgment, be willing to uphold yourself to the same standard of judgment you're passing on someone else. In other words, you can't have your cake and eat it too. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. I think what he's saying here and what he's doing here, and especially within the context of Matthew chapter 7, we should judge only after self-evaluation. When some things are going on, when somebody's caused us some sin, the very first thing we need to do is go to God in prayer and then evaluate our own lives with our own sins. And why do we need to do that? To soften the blow. And to let people know, I'm just as guilty as you are. I've done things in my life that I'm not proud of. And so if we keep reading, it says in Matthew chapter 7, verses 3 through 5, it says, why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? It sounds kind of funny if you visualize that, because I'm a visual person. Or how can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye when there is a log in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take out the log in your own eye. First self-evaluate, pass judgment on yourself, take it to God and let God remove that log. then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. He's not saying that we don't judge. He's saying that when you do judge, take it to the Father. Let Him clean you up so you can help clean someone else up. But it's not you really doing the cleaning. It's Jesus doing the cleaning. But you're pointing people to Jesus, who is the cleanser, who is the perfecter of your faith. We do pass judgment. But where is the judgment to be rooted? Grounded. We must be empathetic. Putting ourselves in people's shoes. Trying to identify with people. That's a very big thing we do in counseling. Is to be empathetic. Trying to understand where that person's coming from. Trying to understand what's happened to this person. One of the most hurtful things we can say to someone is, "What's the matter with you? Why would you do that? Don't you know any better than that?" How many of us have ever been guilty of that as parents? Well, maybe one of the things we should say is, "What happened? And what's happened to you? Tell me your story. Tell me what's happened." So I can listen to what you're saying, so that I can actually make a better judgment. Not judgmental, but a judgment. Because we want to point people to Christ. How would you want to be treated if we're doing empathy? How would you want to be treated if your sins were exposed? How would you want to be treated? Would you want justice or mercy? Because I know you don't want conviction. Would you rather have compassion? I know we would want a second chance. Both Jesus and this woman were on trial. But the woman was just briefly. And Jesus uses it as a powerful tool. Jesus is saying, "You want to put me on trial? You better bring your big boy stuff. Because here it comes." The people knew what kind of woman she was. The kind of woman she was. Here's something that's very profound. Jesus knew what she could be. Jesus can take any sin that you've committed, clean you up, wash you as white as snow, and set you on a path that will blow your mind. Because He knows what you can be. And He knows what you can become. She had her sin exposed before the people. People were trying to trap Jesus by using this woman's sin. And here's something that's interesting. This woman was caught in the very act of adultery. I don't really know how she was caught in the very act. But we know we don't parade sin around, do we? Especially something like that. That's done in secrecy, behind closed doors, dark rooms. Right? So that's something that we live in darkness with. That's why sin is dark. But here's something about Jesus. Up until this point, Jesus has always lived His life in full disclosure and in full, I lost my word there. Fully exposed. He's told them who He is. He's told them where he's from. He's told them what he's about. He has preached and taught in the synagogue. He has preached and taught as he's traveled. He has lived his life fully exposed. And yet they still try to trap him. Jesus lived his life fully exposed for the world to see. And he called this woman out of that. And we're going to see that in just a few minutes. Here's the point with even the Pharisees and the sinners. Jesus is the Lord of second chances. He gives this woman a second chance. And he's trying to give the Pharisees who brought this woman to him a second chance. Because that's what our Lord's about. Even when we've done wrong, willfully wrong, and it gets exposed, and we take it to the Father, or we have somebody point it out to us, and we take it to the Father, He forgives us, and He gives us another chance. Amen. Because He knows we are all messy. Every single one of us. Every one of us has sinned willfully at some point. We all deserve punishment. That's what we deserve. But, thanks be to God, we have been cleansed by the blood of Jesus. We have been cleansed and we have been told to go and sin no more. And if we do sin, we come back to the Father and the blood cleanses us. Just read 1 John. That tells you that. We have been cleansed so that we have fellowship with brothers and sisters that have also been cleansed. We have been cleansed so that we can go out and bring those to Jesus who also need to be cleansed and made whole. Here's something that's interesting about John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. If you look down at verse 12, you'll probably have a different little heading right there, won't you? Where it says something to the effect of, I am the light of the world. Do you have that in your text? And if you drop down to verse 31, you'll see that it has another little text where it says, the truth shall set you free. Do you have that in your text? And then if you go down to verse 39, you are of your father the devil. And if you look down in verse 48, before Abraham was, I am. Here's something that we need to be careful about. When we have those divisions, we think we've moved on to another thought. John chapter 8, starting in verse 1, all the way through verse 59, is the same thought with the same context as what's going on. Everything he's teaching past John chapter 8, verse 11, is telling him about the significance of John chapter 8, verses 1 through 11. Because he tells the woman, who is here to condemn you? Is anyone left? And she says, no one, Lord. And he says, neither do I condemn you. But he doesn't let her off the hook. He says, go away and sin no more. He calls her on the sin. But go away and sin no more. And he tells the Pharisees, you who are without sin, cast the first stone. Well, if I cast a stone, then that means I'm telling everybody that I'm not a sinner. And that's contrary to the truth. So actually, Jesus pinned them. You want to mess with the chess master? Checkmate. At least the Pharisees stopped and self-evaluated before they threw the stone. Incidentally, it started with the older ones down to the younger ones. It took the younger ones a little longer to process. Because sometimes us younger ones are just a little bit that much more hard and hot-headed. But I want you to notice something in John chapter 12. I don't have that up. because we're going to be going in that next week. So I'm not going to give too much thunder away. But he tells the woman, neither do I condemn you. Go from now on and sin no more. Again, Jesus spoke to them, that is this crowd, I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. He calls this woman out of darkness into light. She's still there in this crowd. And he's telling the whole crowd, I am the light of the world. You want to get out of this darkness? Follow me. Because I will brighten the path for you. I am the light that brings you life. This is all the same thought. Which makes the teaching that he keeps on teaching that much more powerful. Because it's what this woman needed to hear. And it's what the Pharisees who brought the woman in needed to hear. And Jesus is going to start telling them some very hard things. And he's not going to let them off the hook. And he's going to use some very strong language with them. Because that's where their hearts are. And it takes very strong and powerful language to chip away the stone that's laid around the heart. I'm going to leave you with this. When we're talking and working with people, and some of them are very difficult to work with, and we know some of those people, there's actually some people out there that you may not even like or love because they're just hard to get along with. I'll leave you with this. You will never look into the eyes of someone that God does not love. Always be kind. I don't know who wrote that. That's been popping up on Facebook a lot. So I put author unknown. Somebody may know who the author is, but it has a profound statement. So when we walk out these doors and we start our Monday, how are we going to reflect the light of life? How are we going to reflect Jesus in our life when we come into contact with others? Because there are people in this community who are committing adultery. There are people in this community who are abusive in their relationships. There are people in this community who are willfully doing things that are against God's will. How are we going to love them? How are we going to call them out of that? The only way we can do it is showing them the love of Jesus. And being compassionate. Being strong. Not wavering. But we're going to call them up to something greater than ourselves. And that is Jesus Christ. Whatever you were struggling with this week, whatever's just been hard, we know we're in a community that's been hit by the floods. We know we have loved ones and people that we care about who are struggling with that. Bring those concerns before us and let us rally around you. If you've wandered away and you're not as strong in the faith as you want to be, we're here to support you and lift you up and bear the burdens with you. You're not alone. Whatever your need is this morning, and however way that we can help and assist you, I ask that you come now as we stand and as we sing.